Special Operations Training Detachment, SOT D West, Burrow Team. Coming at you from NTC, Off the Radar.
This is Off the Radar. I'm Captain Weston Rich, an observer coach trainer for the Green Berets at the National Training Center. Welcome back to Off the Radar and WarDocs mashup covering all things medicine at the combat training centers. In part 1, we discussed 18 Delta training compared to 68 whiskeys, prolonged casualty care, and telemedicine. In part 2, you will hear about non-standard evacuation, medical cross-training, and more. So let's give it a listen.
You know, I'm sure in the SOF community, you've worked in some of that non-standard evacuation and a different type of methods. So at the NTC, what type of non-standard evacuation methods and what are some examples of the unconventional evacs you've executed, and how did it teach you about that adaptability, you know, to think outside that box, to not be so pinpointed into, well, I got to do it this way to execute or move that patient?
So I'm gonna caveat the answer to that question actually with another example. And I like this example because it actually hits on all echelons of using non-standard CASEVAC. So we had a team come through. This was kind of the way that we try to do our PFC scenarios is basically kind of towards the latter 3 to 4 days of their rotation in NTC. It just works out really well. They can finish their PFC, and then as they finish, we just literally index them right there. So it works out really well. So this is about the last 3.5 days of their rotation. They hit a target. We ended up hitting them with we ended up giving them 3 casualties. So they had it was a small team. It was a Jedburgh team. So it was only 3 individuals. But they had a partner force attached to them. And so they had worked with this partner force for a few weeks then. And so the casualties included 2 of the partner force guys and 1 of the ODA members. So at the time, they were completely dependent on transportation from their partner force assets. Well, I designed an injury set around one of their partner force guys. I gave him essentially a cardiac tamponade, which the medic was not going to be able to treat on the ground. Like, this guy was going to die, 100% guaranteed. There's no treating there. Like, the medic was not going to be able to treat a cardiac tamponade in the field. And I designed it that way specifically so that the ODA would run into the dilemma of, do I discontinue treatment on my partner force guy because he's just going to run through medical supplies and it just is going to be a waste? But then, you know, am I now going to run into the dilemma of, I discontinue treatment on my partner force guy, he dies, is my partner force now going to abandon me and no longer provide transport for me? So I wanted to induce that dilemma on the team and see what their decision-making process was. Once they made that decision process, and they did let him die, and the partner force did abandon them because of that. Just essentially, it was a necessary thing that the ODA guys had to do in order to continue treatment on their guy, because that partner force guy was going to soak up every single one of their medical supplies. And honestly, it was probably going to kill their own teammate who was a patient that they could keep alive. Once we had the partner force abandon them, these guys had done like a really good job of setting up clandestine networks. You know, they had an asset available to them that was specifically set aside for medical transportation. What we did in order to induce a little bit more stress, honestly, we did it because they did a good job of setting up that asset from the ground up. And if it was a team that hadn't done a really good job, honestly, I kind of would have given it to them. But because they did do a good job, I took it away from them. So we induced it such that the medical transportation asset was not going to be available. You know, whatever, you know, I mean, and it's a realistic scenario. You know, you're in a wartime environment. Maybe that guy got balled up at a checkpoint. Maybe he's just not able to be there. You know, it happens. So what they ended up referring to do was I put them in another dilemma of, okay, my dedicated medical transportation asset is now burnt or is not available. I have a transportation asset. He is not set aside to actually evac medical patients to medical facilities. It's important in our realm of work to keep these assets compartmentalized because it's just safer that way for everyone involved. So they had a specific asset set aside just for transportation around, they're behind enemy lines. So he was their transportation around these contested areas. I took away their medical transportation asset to see if they were going to burn this transportation asset and see if they were going to reach out to him and say, okay, am I going to take the risk and say, hey, I need you to come pick us up, but you are evacing a patient, and see if they were going to be willing to make that, because effectively what that does is it burns that transportation asset and you are no longer going to have him available because you were asking him to do something that he did not sign up to do, or he's not paid to do. And so they ultimately did make the decision to use their transportation asset. We kind of made him hostile to the team when he showed up. And because all of these assets are they're role players, they're ex soft guys. They're we call them graybeards because they're all guys from I hate to say, Steve, from your time frame.
Yeah. Old, just say it. Old.
No, we love them. They're a phenomenal group of individuals, and they're a pleasure to work with. But they're really easy to work with because and it's part of being an OT or observer, coach, and trainer is we can adapt the scenario and change the role players' roles as things develop. And so because this situation developed where we talked to the role player who was a transportation asset and said, hey, they're going to contact you and tell you to actually do medical transport. They are burning you as an asset. And so we told him, hey, when you get there, be super hostile about this and basically say, this is not my job. This is not what you are paying me to do. And so it forced the team to really actually work through that dilemma of like, oh man, do we actually want to do this? And so we had the role player basically demand like triple what their team was paying him. And so they paid it because they're trying to evac one of their guys. And so we made it essentially such that the FLOT was in a position where these guys were not going to be able to try to drive through it. And so what they had done previously through some of their intel sources was they learned about a local fire department that was friendly to U.S. assets. So this transportation asset drove them down to a fire department. That actual fire department happens to be in Baker, California. We have a really good working relationship with their paramedics down there, and their chief down there is awesome. He's worked with us several times now. And so they evac'd that patient off to that fire department for continued care. It happened to be a burn patient. The reason why I did that is I was basically inducing at like that 78-hour mark of now he's starting to show signs of hyperkalemia, and now he's possibly in risk of having a myocardial infarct. And so it gives us good training opportunities for that 18 Delta to work with the paramedics and actually go through ACLS algorithms. It's one of the things, honestly, that I'll be perfectly honest, 18 Deltas are not good at. Is we get taught to it in the course and we never really touch it again as ACLS. So honestly, that's kind of the biggest example I can give of from start to finish using basically everything available for you for medical transportation, whether that be it started with the partner force, they burned it. The medical transportation asset that they had available, that they had done all the networking for, that we essentially made that unavailable. And then the dedicated transportation asset not set aside for medical transport, now we burned them. And now that they are in a fire department that's friendly to U.S. forces, now we can try to see if they're going to try to leverage that and see, okay, you guys have ambulances. Would you be willing and able to put our casualty in an ambulance, drive back to U.S. lines, and transport him in an ambulance? We didn't really get to that point because we actually had to index the scenario at the fire station. But that was honestly probably one of the best examples that I can come up with of where we saw utilization of pretty much every single available mode of, non-standard CASEVAC that was essentially possible that we can at least provide at NTC.
So I'd actually like both of you guys to comment on this next question, and that is for the non-medics in a soft unit, the operators, support personnel, how can they be valuable in the way they assist the medics during care under fire, tactical casualty care, prolonged care, evacuation? What kind of training do they need, and how can they be helpful and not a hindrance? I'll let Mo go first.
Oh, I was going to let Steve take this one.
Hey, you all got to respect the gray beards. You can go first. It's all good.
All right. I'm not gray yet, but I'm getting there. I'm 36. We'll see. So I'll kind of break it down into each one. I think care under fire, as far as your non-medical trained personnel, they just need to understand what care under fire actually is. And I hate to say it because it's a very unfortunate circumstance and it's an unfortunate example, but it perfectly illustrates it. There was a a video clip that circled around YouTube for a while. I want to say it was Fallujah. There were the Marines, and pretty much everybody's seen this video. The Marines in Fallujah in 2004.
Middle of the street.
Yes, right in the middle of the street. Sniper takes out a guy. Buddy runs up to him to try to rescue him. He gets shot by the sniper. A third guy runs up to him and pulls them out of the firefight. He gets shot. Like, I literally cannot think of a better example of misuse of care under fire for medical treatment than that. And so honestly, the biggest thing that I would say to non-medically trained personnel is understand what care under fire is and what that priority is. That priority is not that medical patient at that point in time. Your priority is to get everybody out of there and gain fire superiority. And do not get sucked into that patient. And I say don't get sucked into that patient because in one of the other things I would say that, your non-medical and support personnel need to be able to do is be those eyes and ears for that medic. The 18 Delta is one, maybe two guys on a team if you have a senior and a junior Delta. I'm not going to be everywhere at once. If somebody goes down on the other side of a wall, I'm not going to know that. So you need to be the eyes and ears for that medic. But at that same time, do not get sucked into that casualty without that fire superiority, without actually gaining the upper hand while you're still in a firefight. And understand that at that point in time, if that guy is still alive, it's his responsibility to take care of himself until you can either gain fire superiority or get behind cover. It's kind of my 2 cents on that. And then as far as TTRIC is concerned, pretty much just knowing that March algorithm, down pat. There may be multiple casualties. So, it's literally just being able to go down that March algorithm and knowing what interventions, like I said, those stop gaps, what needs to be done right there, point of injury. And so that, say you can sit on a patient for another 30 minutes, that Delta can now run around, be that medical manager and start looking at the patients that he didn't get to first and say like, okay, what was the mechanism of injury? Was it a blast, GSW, whatever? Okay, I see you did put a tourniquet here. He's got a chest seal. He's got a needle D that you put in. Okay, perfect. Now I can start getting to work and maybe, you probably saved his life. So, okay, I can hold off, deferring maybe additional treatments for a few hours or something like that. And another one, I hate to say this, but it's because I've seen it and I've seen team guys do it, is I'm going to put it as nicely as I possibly can, and it's stay out of our way. And what I mean by that is there is absolutely nothing more frustrating than being an 18 Delta working on a patient and having 5 guys standing around the patient, just staring at him, asking, is he okay? Is he okay? Do you need anything? And I'm like, if I need something, I will tell you. There's probably a million other things you'd be doing right now other than just standing around and being in my way. Pull security, get with a Zulu and see what he's got for you. Maybe he needs help with the radio, calling up that 9-line medevac. Don't just stand around. If I need help, I will call for it. So I know it seems harsh, but I've had to do it myself, and that's why it's kind of near and dear to my heart. From the PCC standpoint or PFC standpoint, I think I think really the biggest thing is being flexible and being able to take orders from that soft medic, because he's going to be that medical manager at that point. So knowing, having that soft medic direct you to do something, whether that be take vitals, get another IV line on this guy, give him his dose of fentanyl that he needs or whatever, or keep bagging him, 1 every 6 if he's got a crike or an ET tube in. So knowing what to do, when to do it, and how to do it, those are critical. And I hate to say it, but all that just comes down to familiarity with the medical equipment itself, how to operate it, and then just that one-to-one touch point before any sort of deployment with the medic on the team and say like, hey, if we get into a tick and you need to bag this patient, this is how you do it. You shouldn't be like the time to be taught how to bag a patient or set an IV or administer drugs onto a guy is not while that guy is on a table, progressively getting worse, tanking, his vitals are tanking, or he's dying. That's not the time where you need to learn how to do that. That should have been done months ago when you were back at home station. So that's kind of my take. And then evac, honestly, is once again just kind of knowing that March algorithm, because you're going to package that patient. You're going to go back through every single intervention that you've done to that point, and then just being available to help. Once again, it unfortunately kind of comes down to like, stay out of the way if you're not actively engaged on that patient. So hopefully that answers Steve. I'd like to hear your take on this.
You pretty much answered it for me, for the most part. But, I will say, just to elaborate a little bit on what you said about the training portion of it, I think that is so key, because in my time, I heard people talking about, we'll just do that just-in-time training. We'll do it before we go out the door. Mm-hmm. You know what, to me, just-in-time training is just too late. If you're doing it then, it's going to be too late. You really need to plant that seed and do that training with those medics well ahead of time, so you could build that confidence in that medic. Not only that confidence in that medic and his or her abilities, but your confidence in that medic as well too, to be able to take care of you and the rest of your team if something did happen and it came down to it. If you're not ready today, you're not going to be ready tomorrow. So our training to me is paramount. I don't care if it's teachable C, if it's prolonged field care, if it's evac. Training ahead of time. And now sometimes that could be tough for the conventional force because they have so many other rules and requirements, and kind of what you alluded to, it's very black and white for them. They don't have that ability to not to say they don't think outside the box, but they hesitate, because
of course,
am I going to get in trouble? Am I going to lose a stripe? What's going to happen? But to be able to build that confidence, especially from that training standpoint, so that they don't worry about that, and then on top of that, being the senior medic, having their back when something goes wrong and they mess up. Hey, they tried, they gave it their best. It was an honest mistake. We're not going to hammer you and start ripping stripes off your uniform, but we're going to train you and make sure that don't happen next time, and move out and do good things. So that's really the only other thing that I would add to it, is really that preparation and that training is got to be key. It can't be just we're leaving next week, so let's do a brush up training. It's got to be built into that foundation on a regular basis. And that's, like I said, that's tough from a conventional force because they're just so big and that you just don't know who is going with who at some time. So,
yeah. And just like a quick caveat to like the training and familiarization thing. And I want to bring it up honestly, because it's actually huge and it seems such low hanging fruit that I think honestly, a lot of guys, even team guys, and team medics honestly are pretty guilty of it, is literally just sitting down with your aid bag or your truck bag or your PFC box and going by piece where everything is in that bag and what they do and why you use it. That's huge, because at the point of injury, I'm going to, call out to somebody and be like, hey, get in my aid bag and pull this out. There can't be any hesitation from the guy that you directed to do that. Be like, is this it? Is this it? And he holds up random stuff. Like, no, doing a kit shakeout of your med bag is critical.
One of the things that, when I talk to folks, they'll tell me in deployment, you see things that there's no way you could have prepared for it. It's just crazy what you see. So you're at the NTC, you're trying to prepare people for what they're going to see. You got a bunch of graybeards out there telling you stories of all the crazy stuff they went through. How realistic can you get this training, and how do you know it's realistic enough?
So that's a really good question, Doug. We do have limitations. I will fully admit that. Part of those limitations, honestly, comes down to, in an ideal circumstance, I would have a bunch of $50,000 training mannequins that, bleed, they urinate, they scream, they do everything for you. Unfortunately, money makes the world go round. So unfortunately, once we are absolutely privy to that limitation as well. It's just something we don't have. That's something that I've really tried to push hard. Being here at NTC is actually try to secure the funding to actually get those training mannequins, at least some of them. But really, honestly, what it kind of comes down to, unfortunately, is using the actual guy as that patient. And I admittedly, we do lose some training value with that. Because at the end of the day, I'm not going to put a perfectly good guy on a litter for 72 hours. He's going to be absolutely miserable. It's still training. I'm not trying to make them absolutely miserable. If he's a burn patient, quote unquote, I'm not going to actually give him 6 liters of fluid and make him absolutely miserable and have to get up to pee every, 30 seconds. He sure as hell is not getting a fully catheter inserted. Although, I guess it's good training. So that honestly, I will be perfectly frank and honest, that's been a huge limitation out here. Now, from what I feel like as far as the wound sets are concerned, I feel like we've done a pretty good job. It's the onus is on us to replicate, what these guys could see. Like I said kind of earlier, the kind of the days of GWOT are over. We're looking more towards the large scale combat operations. So majority of the wound sets that we see, we don't typically have these guys drive over IEDs. That's really not kind of in the purview of large scale combat operations. Honestly, what really drives a lot of these factors and a lot of these prolonged field care scenarios is stuff that we're learning out of Ukraine, honestly, is what it's kind of coming down to. So we have a very, very robust C5ISR package. They are contracted UAS pilots. They have the ability to do drop capabilities with their drones. And so we've pushed that really, really hard. Dropping up to, it essentially, honestly, is really all it is a tennis ball hanging from the drone. It's filled with usually like baby powder or flour. Drops, lands near the guy, big puff of smoke. Hey, that was a grenade or a 60 millimeter mortar that just went off. So we cater the wound sets to that. If it happens to hit a vehicle and they're in the vehicle, okay, now you've got multi-system trauma patients and probably some burn victims as well. So we've tried to replicate that as best as possible. I've been currently kind of working with those C5ISR guys to bring in, because we've seen it in Ukraine, we've seen the Russians start to use, chemical warfare. There was a video that came out not too long ago of a Russian drone dropping white phosphorus on a wood line. That's something I'm actually trying to get authorized for our C5ISR guys to replicate for the 18 Deltas. Steve, I know I talked to you earlier actually about that exact same scenario. I'll be perfectly honest, I have no idea how to treat a white phosphorus patient. That is something that I want to challenge 18 Deltas out here to have to deal with. It is a really crappy scenario and a extremely difficult situation to have to deal with a chem patient or, God forbid, a white phosphorus or rad patient. But it's, it is the onus is on us as the National Training Center to challenge these medics, to push them beyond their comfort zones. That's honestly what I can't stand the most, because I unfortunately have participated in medical training that, it was just to check the block. I can't stand training like that. It does not make you a better medic. It does not make you confident. what makes me confident at the end of the day is being challenged and having something that really forced me to go outside my comfort zone. If I can knock something out of the park, you know, it is what it is. I'm not going to come out of that thinking like, oh man, like I need to push myself harder. I need to start learning. I need to read some doctrine, or I need to read some medical journals. If I'm going to come out of a training scenario, especially a medical training scenario, where I can look back on it and go, I had no idea what the hell to do, or at least maybe not definitively. Maybe I could at least try to get in the right direction. That is the point that I want to try to get these medics towards. Like I said, I think we've tried to do a really good job of it. But there's still some growing pains that we need to do. And honestly, the big factor of it is funding.
So I'm going to ask another question that I'd like both of you guys to weigh in, and we'll start with Steve on this one. In your experience, what is the single most important attribute, mental, physical, or otherwise, that really determines success for a soft medic, 18 Delta, soft me, IDC, especially in, you know, high stakes environments like, you know, what Mo's describing at NTC?
You know, for me, what I've seen and what I believe is the most important attribute is resilience from a medical standpoint, and that's kind of looking at the resilience both from a mental and an emotional strength, being able to remain calm under pressure and make decisions and effectively lead and manage different scenarios. You know, there's going to be chaos every time they call for a medic. You know, they don't ever call for a medic when something's good happening. You know, they're not offering you tea and crumpets or nothing like that. It's usually bad stuff. So, you know, people are going to be, you know, excited. They're going to be scared. They're not going to be sure what to expect. But you need to have that resilience. You know, and you know, Mo was talking about some of the scenarios that they're running out there. You know, your buddy may be the one that doesn't make it home, but that doesn't mean that you quit. You know, you have that resilience to continue on and take care of the team to ensure the mission is done and whatever else is laid out in front of you. And a lot of that resilience for me is kind of built on that training foundation. You know, the reps and not only the physical reps of the different skills, but the mental reps, I think, are even more important that one has to go through and navigate. You know, when you think about it, you look at the Olympics, these sprinters, you know, run 100 yards in 9 to 10 seconds. But how much effort and training do they put into that point to get there? How many years of training and focus do they put into that 9 or 10 seconds? You know, how many skills can you do to save somebody's life in 9 or 10 seconds? And are we putting that same amount of effort into that? So that training really will build that resilience. And to me, resilience is one of the key attributes that I've seen and has helped me in different times throughout my career.
How about you, Mo? What do you think is an important attribute to be successful?
So I'm going to break a rule and not say one, but basically combine two of them because I can't pick between two of them. I think honestly for me is, and it kind of comes down to what I've seen out here, is really flexibility and foresight. And I come at this from a kind of a time standard. So basically, literally from doing your med order back at group to, you know, the end of your prolonged field care or your scenario, whatever, here at NTC. You know, being flexible and understanding that, you know, when you do your med order, you're not going to get everything you ask for. That's just not how it works. So be able to be flexible with that and work with what you got. You know, when you do your mission planning, one of the best things that I've learned as an 18 Delta, and I was really nervous to do it. I pitched we were doing our MDMP, and we pitched our mission brief to the battalion command leadership, and I was really nervous to do it, and I really wasn't sure how it was going to go over, but actually I got commended for it afterwards. They said that was the best medical brief that we've received thus far. And basically what it entailed was I was completely honest with them, and I explained our medical shortcomings for this mission and was very upfront and blatant with it, and gave them scenarios of where if this happens, we will not be combat effective. And they actually appreciated that. I was extremely nervous to do that because God forbid you tell the command team of like, oh, you don't want to tell the command team of like, oh, hey, I can't do anything about this. Bummer. But actually they appreciated that more than me just selling them snake oil and like, oh yeah, I can take care of everything. Don't worry about it. So, being honest and upfront and having that flexibility and knowing what your shortcomings are and being able to do the best of your ability to deal with that. And then, just kind of going into, the scenarios at NTC. We try to make a very dynamic environment here. The NTC scenario is broken down to different phases of battle, and it kind of really depends on where the FLOT is, how far behind the brigade that's actually doing the fighting is, what cities have they taken? Is it an east to west rotation? Is it a west to east rotation? These phases of battle change a lot. And unfortunately, what I see a lot of medics get sucked into is, they do their brief to their company command leadership or the battalion command leadership. And, they have all these great medical plans. They have their PACE plans set in place. They have their ideas for their transportation assets, but they don't adjust it. They don't adapt it to these phases of the battle. As the FLOT changes, certain medical assets may come online. Certain medical assets may turn offline. This kind of comes into coordination with your, this comes into play with your coordination of the conventional force medical assets. The conventional force comes with typically a pretty robust medical package. They have a roll 2 that they set up. They have dedicated medical M113s. I have yet to see a medic reach out to the conventional force leadership or have their leadership reach out to the conventional force leadership and see where those medical assets are and see what their coverage bubble is, what their range is, and see how that interplays with the mission sets that the ODA has coming up. We're taught as special operations medics to explore the, unconventional evac medical networks. Well, okay, that doesn't mean that you should just completely negate the conventional force medical evac networks because they're still there. They're still in the fight. Why discount them? And so I think that biggest thing with that adaptability is be able to shift your plan. Realize it's not just one static thing that you can rely on for the entirety of the mission. You are going to have to continuously work. It's not just a one and done, check the block. Hey, medical plan, good to go. It's something that you have to develop and shift and be able to have the foresight to know when it needs to shift.
So on WarDocs, we have some younger folks that are listeners. What is one piece of advice that you'd give to a baby brand new medic that you wish that somebody had shared with you when you started?
So this is going to be kind of a rehashing of a little bit, I'll be honest, a little bit of a rehashing of what I just said, is be flexible and adaptive. I brought up that med order thing because that's near and dear to my heart because I never got what I asked for in my med order. I was always short stuff. That's going to happen. It absolutely is going to happen. But you need to be able to plead your case to medlog, the battalion doc of why you need these specific things and do it intelligently. Like, you are supposed to be a medical professional, be a professional. Don't just go in there and see like, I want my stuff because I want my stuff. Be able to speak intelligently of like, okay, this is why I need this. This is, maybe it's not mission critical, but it could be mission critical. The mission planning thing that I mentioned earlier, that goes huge. Do not be afraid to have that honest assessment of your medical capabilities. I'll put out a really good example. We had a ODA. They hadn't come out here yet, so they were doing their SMIB to us because when a SF company comes out here, the leadership here basically takes the role of the SOTIF, so the battalion level leadership, because we're the ones that run the scenario. So we're going to feed them the information that would essentially come from their battalion that would be forward deployed. And so they were doing their SMIB with us. And I specifically remember this 18 Delta when he did his and granted, this was right when I got to NTC, so it was about 18 months ago. I remember specifically he went through his medical slide, and I could tell this was a boilerplate medical slide that he used for all his other briefs, because it looked like all the other slides that I used for my medical briefs, because his first priority for medical evac was UH-60. And so I literally stopped him in the middle of this brief and said, take that off your slide. You're in LISCO. Your helicopter is going to get shot down immediately. Take it off your slide. And so, be willing to understand those shortcomings. We're moving into uncharted waters here. This isn't just coin. We're not in counterinsurgency stuff. We're not doing DA action raids. LISCO is a whole different fight. We're going to have deficiencies. And just be flexible with it. Another big thing that, honestly, a big thing that kind of goes with the adaptability thing is understand that, yes, as SOF, we are going to have access to a lot better of equipment and a lot more, battlefield proven equipment. However, there's still deficiencies with this stuff. The reason I bring this up is, the other podcast that I did talking about prolonged field care, I brought up a scenario where I talk about field expedient medicine and being able to adapt on the fly. The reason I bring that up is we got into a conversation about using pelvic binders, like commercially made pelvic binders. There's certain pelvic binders that I'm not a huge fan of. So I'm not going to name the company that makes it, but basically it has a little inflatable ball and it pushes pressure on the femoral arteries with inflatable plastic portions of it. Myself, having done mission sets in the high north, I've seen that ball explode. I've seen that plastic break when it gets below -20. So I don't want things like that to fail me. Going through SOCMAS, our refresher course, one of the previous students had left something in there that he used as a junctional tourniquet adjunct. Basically what you did was you took a pelvic binder, which kind of uses the same, strap that goes across your pelvis to hold your pelvis in place to keep it from moving around. And it literally was a piece of 3D printed nylon about this big and about 2 inches tall in the shape of like about a hilltop. He put that on the pelvic binder and put it directly against pressure with the femoral artery. And that had the best hemorrhage control out of every single commercially made pelvic binder we had. It was a junctional tourniquet we had. It was literally just a pelvic binder and probably a 10-cent piece of 3D printed nylon. So be willing to explore the unexplored. I can't name of any, unfortunately, offhand right now. There's a lot of really good literature that was produced by guys that went through the Vietnam War that had to do field expedient medicine. I think that's something that we've lost a lot of general knowledge based on. Of these guys had to deal with zero supplies, and so they had to find ways to make things work. I think that's something that we've lost. So I realize that was kind of a long answer, but that's kind of my 2 cents to a brand new Delta, is be able to be flexible and adaptive in an extremely, extremely dynamic environment. Like I said, LISCO is uncharted territory. Be prepared to be uncomfortable. Actually, honestly, that's the best way that I can say it. Be prepared to be uncomfortable.
So, Steve, is there anything that you would add to, give advice to a brand new medic, with something that you wish you would have known when you started, back in the 20th century?
Yeah, right. Just throw it out there like that.
Yeah. I started in the 20th century as well.
I think for me, the ability to have that continual drive to want to do more. When you do your first skills verification, great. I passed it. I did good. How do I do it faster? How do I do it more efficiently? When I first got to the unit, they gave me a mannequin and they gave me a bag. They let me give me about 30 seconds to go through the bag, and then we ran through some quick scenarios right there in the training room. Then they threw me in the closet. Literally, it was like a big storage closet. Shut the lights off. Gave me another training bag. Gave me a different scenario, and they said, "Here, get after it. No lights, no chem lights, no NVGs, no nothing." And it's like, you gotta be kidding me. I don't even know what I'm doing, And it was really it was to show me, hey, you ain't as good as you think you are. You may be hot stuff outside when you first get here. Yeah, you're a paramedic. Ooh, yeah, you went to flight paramedic school. Oh, okay, great. You moved casualties, but this is a different ball game when it comes to military medicine. So having that drive and the desire to do more and to get to the point where you're doing things that you didn't think you'd ever be able to do, or leading people in a way that you don't think you'd ever be able to do, but to have that confidence and take that chance and step out of the comfort zone. And I'd say not even step outside the box. I'd say throw the box to the side. Don't even have a box, but just lead and get after it. But really, have that drive and desire to do that, because nobody's going to do that for you. Training's going to be training, but that comes from within. So that's something that I would recommend, is to have that drive and that desire to do more and to push yourself.
So Mo, I know that at the beginning of the conversation, you talked about, pathways that you're going to go in life. And you talked about maybe being a portfolio manager and making a whole lot of money and doing something different. But, now you've been in the Army for over 12 years. Tell me your why. Why do you continue to wake up every morning, put the uniform on and say, I'm going to my job and I'm making a difference? Why do you do it?
Huh. I'll be honest, I wasn't prepared for that question. I think honestly what it really comes down to is and this is going to kind of sound selfish. I want to challenge myself. I'll be perfectly frank and honest. I did not join the Army from some sort of sense of national pride or, really wanting to serve my nation. I'll be perfectly frank and honest with that. It was a way to, like I said earlier, kind of like when we first started the introductions, to work with like-minded individuals and to force myself into a realm of discomfort. I knew that this was going to be a challenge, and it's something that I want to keep striving on doing. So just a little bit of like what I'm looking forward to in the future, actually. So, I'm actually finishing my time in NTC in this coming September. I'm going back to 10th group, and then actually I will be submitting my Special Forces warrant packet to try to go down that pipeline. It was something that I've been wanting to do for a while now. But it just kind of comes down to me wanting to push the boundaries of what I'm comfortable with. I really don't like being comfortable in my job. I'll be honest. And this will kind of sound morose. I'll be perfectly honest. What we do, the job that special operations does, yes, it may look, it may look glamorous on the outside. It looks glamorous from a Hollywood standpoint. It looks glamorous from video games and from books and whatnot and TV shows, whatever. We are not idols. Like, I find it disturbing someone who idolizes soft personnel. I can't take credit for what I'm about to say. Somebody else actually said it really well for me. You really shouldn't idolize special operations soldiers, because they are willing to do extremely dangerous, extremely questionable things on behalf of their country. And on behalf of like the national security of the United States. Now, yes, do we work with partner force nations to actually kind of, build them up to fight oppressive regimes, yes, absolutely. But at the end of the day, it's all done under, kind of, forwarding U.S. interests. Like, we're not going to work with partner nations that aren't allies. But at the same time, I wanted to be able to balance that now, because obviously that sounds like an extremely morose statement. However, but I wanted to balance it. And that's actually part of the reason why I became a medic. I wanted to balance that violence that I will inevitably have to do to another human being. Unfortunately, it's part of the job. It is what it is. I'm special operations. I wanted to balance that with the ability to save people's lives. And that's just kind of the mental gymnastics that I had to come to terms with. And it was something actually, honestly, that I didn't really realize until my wife actually brought it up to me and said, your job is juxtaposed. I've made it a habit of myself personally to try to go through every single sniper school I can possibly go to. I went through Big Army Sniper School back when I was with the 82nd. I went through Special Forces Sniper School, and I'm still trying to go do additional courses and do competitions. And my wife saw that and saw what I was doing, trying to become essentially more lethal, and juxtaposing it with being a advanced medical professional. And she said, that's how you find balance in your life. And that's what I'm trying to do, is find that fine line, that fine balance between do no harm and I may have to do serious harm.
We've been speaking with Sergeant First Class Mo Bogert on WarDocs podcast. Mo, thanks again for sharing your experiences and insights with us, and thank you for your service. We wish you the best in all the future endeavors that you got.
Thank you so much, Doug. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to speak with us. And this is something that, our podcast has wanted to do for a while now, is do kind of like this joint collaboration. So I really appreciate you putting this on and being willing to work with Off the Radar for us.
All right. Take care. And thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Off the Radar, where RSOF prepares for conflict. Like, subscribe, and share on your listening platform.
Actions will determine the outcome.